During dinner with my parents, I got a text. Get up and leave. Don't say anything to your parents. My name is Amanda Lewis. I'm 31 years old and I'm a software developer from Denver. I used to think I had a normal family. Tense, maybe. Difficult, for sure. But I never thought they were dangerous. I was wrong. The story I'm about to tell you is the kind you see in movies, the kind you never think could happen to you. It happened to me right in my parents' dining room, over a plate of dry chicken and a glass of cranberry juice. Before we diving in like this video, subscribe to this channel and tell me in the comment where in the world are you watching from. The dining room table was the same one I'd grown up with, a dark, heavy oak thing my dad had bought at a furniture store that went out of business 20 years ago. It was covered in tiny scratches and water rings, each one a ghost of a family dinner past. The air smelled of roasted chicken and my mom's potpourri, a cloying mix of cinnamon and something trying to be pine. It was the smell of a normal Sunday evening, a forced normal, but normal nonetheless. My dad, Richard, was at the head of the table, cutting his chicken into perfectly even, unnecessarily small pieces. He was going on about traffic on the I-25, his voice a low grumble that had become the background music to my life. It's just ridiculous is what it is, he said, shaking his head as if he were the first person in history to be inconvenienced by rush hour. My mom, Carol, sat opposite him, her smile stretched just a little too tight. She was the master of pretending everything was fine. She could smile through an argument, a financial crisis, or a Category 5 hurricane. Tonight, her smile was a work of art. She refilled my dad's water glass, her movements smooth and practiced. Well, at least we're all together now, Richard. That's what matters. Her eyes flickered toward me, checking if I was appreciating the sentiment. I gave her a small, non-committal nod. My younger sister, Sarah, was slumped in her chair, her face lit by the blue glow of her phone. She was scrolling through something, her thumb moving in a quick, repetitive flick. Every few seconds, she'd let out a little huff of air, either in amusement or annoyance. She hadn't said more than 3 words since I'd arrived. That was typical. Sarah communicated in sighs and eye rolls. I was picking at a dry piece of chicken breast, pushing a mound of lumpy mashed potatoes around my plate. I'd been dreading this dinner all week. Things had been tense between us for a while, ever since I'd said no to them for the first time in my adult life. But my mother had insisted. For me, Amanda, she'd pleaded on the phone, let's just have a nice, normal family dinner. We can get past all this. I knew it was a lie. We never got past anything. We just buried it under layers of polite conversation and my mom's too sweet cranberry juice. She had poured me a glass when I arrived, pushing it into my hand with a cheerful, "Here you go, sweetie. Your favorite." I hated cranberry juice. I had told her 100 times, but in my family, you were assigned a favorite food, a favorite color, a favorite personality trait, and you were expected to stick with it. I was the responsible one, the serious one, the one who liked cranberry juice. So I sat there, nursing the glass of juice I had no intention of drinking, listening to my dad complain and my sister scroll, and feeling the familiar weight of being in that house settle on my shoulders. It was a physical feeling, like a heavy blanket that made it hard to breathe. I just had to get through another hour. One more hour of smiling and nodding, and then I could go back to my own quiet apartment, to my own life, where I could breathe again. That's when my phone buzzed. It was lying face down on the table beside my plate. A single sharp vibration against the wood. It was probably just a work email or a notification from a news app. I almost ignored it, but some small instinct made me reach for it. I picked it up and slid my thumb across the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. I didn't recognize the area code. My brow furrowed. Probably a spam message. I was about to delete it, but then I read the words, "Get up and leave. Don't say anything to your parents." I read the message once, then twice. The letters seemed to jump around on the screen. It felt like a prank, a sick joke. Who would send something like this? I looked up from my phone. Nothing had changed. My dad was still talking about traffic. My mom was still smiling her plastic smile. Sarah was still glued to her phone. The world in that dining room was exactly the same as it had been 10 seconds ago, but my world had just tilted on its axis. My heart started to beat a little faster. A cold knot formed in the pit of my stomach. I discreetly typed a reply, my fingers fumbling on the small keyboard. Who is this? I hit send and placed the phone back on the table, face down. I tried to look normal. I picked up my fork and pushed the potatoes around some more. I took a slow, deliberate breath, trying to calm the sudden tremor in my hands. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. A wrong number. Across the table, my mom's eyes were on me. "Everything okay, sweetie?" she asked, her voice syrupy sweet. "Yeah, fine," I mumbled. "Just a text from work." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes lingered on me for a second too long. It was a look I knew well. It was her information-gathering look. She was scanning me, analyzing me, trying to figure out what was happening inside my head. My phone buzzed again. My hand darted out to grab it before I could even think. This time, I shielded the screen with my body, angling it away from the table. It was a reply from the same number. "You don't have time. Just go. Please. Please." That was the word that broke through the fog of my confusion. Spammers didn't say please. Pranksters didn't say please. This was real. The cold knot in my stomach tightened into a ball of ice. My breath caught in my throat. I looked around the table again, but this time I saw everything differently. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. My dad wasn't just complaining about traffic. He was filling the silence, creating a wall of noise. My sister wasn't just scrolling on her phone. She was avoiding eye contact, deliberately disengaged. And my mom's smile, it wasn't just tight. It was a mask, a carefully constructed mask hiding something else. I looked at the glass of cranberry juice sitting untouched by my plate. The deep red liquid seemed to glow under the dim light of the chandelier. A warning bell started to ring in my head, faint at first, then louder and louder until it was a deafening siren. Something was wrong. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. And as I sat there, trapped at that old oak table, I had to make a choice. Ignore the message and stay, or listen to a complete stranger and run. That text, those few simple words from a number I didn't know, changed everything I thought I knew about my family. It was the beginning of the end. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that if I didn't get out of that house, I might not get out at all. To understand the fear that seized me in that moment, you have to understand my family. On the surface, we were the perfect picture. My dad was a respected accountant. My mom volunteered at the local animal shelter. We lived in a nice 2-story house in a quiet Denver suburb with a well-manicured lawn and a 2-car garage. To our neighbors, to our extended family, to anyone on the outside looking in, the Lewis family was a success story. We were stable, we were happy, but that was just the surface. Behind the closed doors of that house, there was a different reality. My parents were masters of manipulation, and their weapon of choice was guilt. They had 2 faces. There was the public face, polite, charming, generous hosts who always brought the best casserole to the neighborhood potluck. Then there was the private face, the one only Sarah and I ever saw. That face was cold, calculating, and relentlessly demanding. Growing up, my role was clear. I was the responsible one. It was a title they gave me early on, and it became a cage. When Sarah needed money for a school trip she'd forgotten about, it was my babysitting money that covered it. When my dad made a bad investment and needed to borrow a few $1,000s to stay afloat, it was my college fund that took the hit. "It's just until things turn around, Amanda," he'd say, clapping me on the shoulder. "You're the responsible one. We can count on you." Things never seemed to turn around, and I never got the money back. I became their safety net, their personal bank, their emotional punching bag. I paid for Sarah's first car after she crashed the one my parents bought her. I co-signed the lease on her first apartment, a lease she broke 3 months later, leaving me to pay the penalty. I covered bills, fixed appliances, and mediated their endless circular arguments. I did it because I thought that's what love was. I thought being the responsible one meant I was earning their affection, their approval. I spent years trying to earn something they were never willing to give. The pattern was always the same. They would create a crisis, and I would be expected to solve it. My mom was the expert at framing the request. She'd call me, her voice trembling with manufactured panic. "Oh, Amanda, I don't know what we're going to do. Your father's company is talking about layoffs again, and the property tax is due." She would trail off, leaving the silence for me to fill. And I always did. I would sigh, pull up my online banking app, and transfer the money. The relief in her voice was immediate. "Oh, thank you, sweetie. You're a lifesaver. You've always been such a good daughter." The praise felt good for a moment, like a warm drink on a cold day. But the warmth never lasted. It was conditional. It was the payment for my compliance. Sarah, on the other hand, was the creative one. That was the family's code word for irresponsible. She drifted from job to job, from one bad relationship to another, leaving a trail of debt and drama in her wake. But while I was criticized for being too serious or too cautious, Sarah was excused. "Oh, that's just Sarah," my mom would say with a forgiving wave of her hand. "She's just finding herself." My parents enabled her, bailed her out, and cleaned up her messes, all while praising her for her free spirit. They paid her rent, covered her car insurance, and never once asked her to be responsible for her own life. The breaking point came about a month before that horrible dinner. Sarah called me crying. It wasn't unusual for Sarah to call me crying, but this time was different. She had gotten into trouble, real trouble. She had a gambling problem, something she'd managed to hide from all of us. She'd been playing online poker and she'd lost big. She owed $12,000 to a very unsavory online lender, and they were threatening to break her legs if she didn't pay up. "You have to help me, Mandy," she sobbed into the phone. "I'm so scared. I'll pay you back, I swear. Every penny." I felt the old familiar pull, the instinct to fix, to save, to be the responsible one. My savings account had just over that amount in it, money I had been carefully putting away for a down payment on a small condo. It was my escape fund, my ticket to a life that was truly my own. Sarah knew about the money. Of course she knew. My mom had probably told her. But for the first time in my life, something inside me snapped. I was 31 years old. I was tired of being the family ATM. I was tired of setting myself on fire to keep them warm. "No," I said. The word felt strange in my mouth, foreign and heavy. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "What?" Sarah whispered, as if she couldn't have heard me correctly. "No, Sarah, I'm not giving you the money." I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "You need to get help. Real help. A therapist, a support group. I'll help you find one. I'll go with you. But I am not giving you $12,000. The sobbing stopped instantly, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. "Wow," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "I see how it is. Now that you've got your perfect little life, your fancy tech job, you can't be bothered to help your own family. You've always looked down on me." Before I could respond, the line went dead. An hour later, my mom called. She didn't yell. She never yelled. Her method was far more effective. Her voice was quiet, laced with a deep, crushing disappointment. "I just can't believe you would turn your back on your sister like that, Amanda," she said. "She's in trouble. She needs us. Family is supposed to help family. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? Everything you've done for me." The question burst out of me before I could stop it. "Mom, I've been bailing you guys out for over a decade. That money is for my future. It's the only thing I have that's just mine." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she said, her voice turning sharp. "You have your rules and your budgets. We get it. You're better than us. But some things are more important than money." The conversation ended with her hanging up on me. My dad never called, but I knew he was there, standing behind my mom, feeding her lines, reinforcing their shared narrative of my selfishness. For a month, there was silence. No calls, no texts. It was the longest I had ever gone without speaking to them. Part of me was relieved. The silence was peaceful. But another part of me, the part that had been conditioned for 30 years to seek their approval, felt a gnawing anxiety. Then last week, my mom called as if nothing had happened. Her voice was cheerful, bubbly. "Hi, sweetie. I was just thinking, it's been too long. Why don't you come over for dinner on Sunday? I'll make your favorite roast chicken." I knew it was a trap. I knew it was a performance, but I was tired of the silence. And that small, stupid part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. Maybe they had thought about what I'd said. Maybe they were ready to apologize. So I said yes. And now, here I was, sitting at their table, a plate of their food in front of me, the air thick with unspoken resentment. Their smiles, their small talk, their pretense of normalcy, it was all a lie. They hadn't forgiven me for saying no. They were punishing me for it. They had lured me here to this dinner to make me feel my isolation, to remind me that their love was conditional, and I had failed to meet the conditions. The surface was calm, but underneath, I could feel the churning currents of their anger and disappointment. They were smiling at me, passing me the salt, asking about my job, all while secretly resenting me for breaking the unspoken rules of our family. I was their safety net, and I had let them fall. And as I sat there staring at the terrifying text on my phone, I started to understand that they would do anything to get that safety net back. My heart was a drum against my ribs. I had to get out of the dining room. I needed a space where I could think, where I could breathe without feeling my mother's eyes on me. "I'm just going to use the restroom," I said, my voice sounding surprisingly steady. I pushed my chair back slowly, carefully placing my napkin on the table. "Are you feeling all right, dear?" my mom asked, her brow furrowed with that fake concern again. "You look a little pale." "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a bit of a headache." I walked out of the room, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. I didn't go to the downstairs powder room. I went up the carpeted stairs, my hand gripping the familiar oak banister. I needed to be further away. Each step was a struggle against the urge to turn and run out the front door. but the text had said not to say anything to them. That meant I couldn't let them know I was suspicious. I went into the upstairs bathroom, the one I had shared with Sarah growing up. The floral wallpaper was peeling at the corners, and the faucet still had that annoying drip, a steady plink, plink, plink against the porcelain sink. I closed the door behind me, and for the first time in my life in that house, I locked it. The click of the lock was a small, satisfying sound in the heavy silence. I leaned against the door, my forehead pressed against the cool wood, and took a deep, shuddering breath. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I stared at the screen, at the unknown number. Who was it? How did they know I was in danger? I had to call. I had to know. My thumb hovered over the call button. What if it was a trick? What if this was part of some elaborate, cruel joke? But the fear that was coiling in my gut told me it wasn't a joke. I pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice. I held my breath. Just as I was about to hang up, someone answered. There was no greeting, just the sound of quiet breathing. Hello? I whispered, my voice hoarse. There was a pause, and then a man's voice, hushed and urgent. You're still there? The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. My mind was racing, trying to connect the voice to a face. Who is this? I asked again, more forcefully this time. How did you get my number? It's Mark, he said. Mark. The name hit me like a splash of cold water. Mark was Sarah's ex-boyfriend. They had dated for about a year, a tumultuous on-again, off-again relationship that had ended in a massive fight about 3 months ago. I had only met him a few times. He seemed nice enough, quiet and a little intimidated by my family. Sarah had told me he was a bartender at some downtown club. Why would Mark be texting me, Mark? I said, my voice filled with disbelief. Why are you contacting me? What is going on? Listen to me, Amanda, he whispered, his voice tight with anxiety. I don't have a lot of time. You have to get out of that house. Right now. Why? What are you talking about? My head was spinning. This was insane. Just trust me, he pleaded. Don't eat or drink anything, especially not the juice. Did you drink the juice? My blood ran cold. I looked at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. My face was pale, my eyes wide with a terror that was quickly replacing my confusion. My untouched glass of cranberry juice sat on the dining room table like a poison apple. No, I breathed. No, I haven't touched it. I heard him let out a long, shaky sigh of relief. Good, that's good. Mark, you have to tell me what's happening, I said, my voice rising with panic. I could hear the faint murmur of voices from downstairs. My family, talking about me. They're my parents. My sister. They're not who you think they are, he said, his voice dropping even lower. Sarah, she talks when she drinks? She told me things. I didn't want to believe her. Thought she was just exaggerating, you know? But tonight she called me, drunk, bragging about it. Bragging about what? I demanded, pressing the phone harder against my ear. The dripping faucet seemed to be counting down the seconds of my life. The plan, he said. They've been planning it for weeks, ever since you refused to give her the money. They were going to drug you, just enough to make you drowsy, disoriented. They were going to put you to bed and then... He hesitated. And then what? I whispered, my own voice barely audible. And then use your fingerprint to unlock your phone and your banking apps, he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. They were going to drain your accounts. Sarah said it was what you owed them. She said you wouldn't even notice for a day or two, and by then it would be too late. I leaned heavily against the sink, my knees suddenly weak. The room seemed to sway around me. It couldn't be true. My own mother, my father, my sister, they couldn't. But even as the denial screamed in my head, 100 little memories, 100 small betrayals, rose to the surface. My mom going through my purse when she thought I wasn't looking. My dad borrowing my credit card and conveniently forgetting to mention it. Sarah stealing my pain medication after I had my wisdom teeth out. They had always dismissed my boundaries. They had always seen what was mine as theirs for the taking. This wasn't a sudden leap into villainy. It was just the next logical step in a lifetime of disrespect and entitlement. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so monstrous I couldn't bear to look at it. The overly cheerful invitation to dinner, the insistence that I come. My mother pushing that glass of juice into my hand. Your favorite, the words echoed in my mind, no longer a thoughtless habit, but a sinister lie. Are you sure? I asked Mark, my voice trembling. I needed to hear him say it again. I needed to be absolutely certain. Amanda, I wouldn't be calling you if I wasn't, he said, and for the first time, I heard a flicker of anger in his voice. Sarah laughed about it. She said you were so predictable, so easy to fool. She said you'd come running back the second your mommy called. I'm sorry, but you need to hear this. You need to know what they are. My stomach dropped. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I thought I was going to be sick. He was right. They had played me perfectly. They had counted on my sense of duty, my guilt, my desperate need for their approval. And I had walked right into their trap. What do I do? I whispered. I felt like a child, lost and terrified. Just leave, he said. Make up an excuse. A migraine, an emergency at work, anything. Just don't let them know you're suspicious. Don't let them near your phone. Get in your car and drive away and don't look back. The murmur of voices from downstairs stopped. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Someone's coming. I breathed into the phone. Go, Mark said urgently. Now, the line went dead. I was alone in the bathroom. The only sounds the dripping faucet and the frantic beating of my own heart. Outside the door, I heard my sister's voice. Mandy? She called, her voice sweet and concerned. Are you okay in there? You've been a while. I was standing in a cage, and the keepers were right outside the door. My mind was a whirlwind of panic and disbelief. Mark's words echoed in the small, wallpapered bathroom. They were going to drug you. Use your fingerprint. Drain your accounts. It sounded like the plot of a cheap thriller, something you watch on a Tuesday night when there's nothing else on. It was too dramatic, too evil to be real. My family argued about politics at Thanksgiving and forgot birthdays. They didn't orchestrate elaborate criminal conspiracies against their own daughter. But as I stood there, frozen with fear, my life started to flash before my eyes. Not the big moments, but the small ones. The 1,000 tiny cuts, the little betrayals that I had excused and ignored for years. Each memory was another bar in the cage I was just now realizing I was in. I remembered being in college, working a part-time job at the campus library to save up for a spring break trip with my friends. I had saved almost $500, a fortune to me back then. I kept the cash in a locked box in my dorm room. A week before the trip, my parents came to visit. The next day, the money was gone. When I called them, hysterical, my dad was calm. Oh, that, he said, as if it were nothing. We had to borrow it. The transmission went out on the car. We'll pay you back. They never did. I stayed in my dorm room all of spring break, eating ramen noodles while my friends sent me postcards from the beach. I had told myself they needed it more than I did. I had excused it. I remembered the time I got my first real job offer, the one I have now. I was so excited. It was a great company with a fantastic salary. When I told my parents, the first thing my mom said was, "Oh, that's wonderful, honey. Now you can help us with that new roof we need." There was no congratulations, no pride in my accomplishment, just an immediate calculation of how my success could benefit them. I ended up paying for half the roof. I had told myself it was what a good daughter would do. I had excused it and Sarah. I thought about all the times she had lied to me, manipulated me, the time she lost the expensive necklace I had let her borrow, only for me to see her wearing it in a picture on social media months later. When I confronted her, she just laughed. "Oh, this? I bought one just like it." I must have gotten them mixed up. The way she would forget her wallet every time we went out to eat. The way she would read my journals when we were teenagers, and then use my deepest insecurities against me in a fight. I had always told myself that was just how sisters were. I had excused it all. I had spent my entire life making excuses for them, reframing their selfishness as need, their manipulation as love. I saw it so clearly now. Mark hadn't told me something new. He had only given me the key to a door I had been too afraid to open. He had given me permission to see what was right in front of me all along. My family didn't love me. They saw me as a resource, an asset, a walking, talking bank account with a beating heart they could occasionally pat on the head to keep it compliant. And when their asset had finally refused to perform, when I had dared to say no and protect what was mine, they hadn't reflected on their behavior. They hadn't tried to understand my point of view. They had simply moved from manipulation to outright theft. The plan to drug me wasn't absurd. It was the culmination of 31 years of them chipping away at my boundaries, testing my limits, and seeing how much they could take before I broke. The knock on the door came again, harder this time. "Amanda, open the door," Sarah said, her voice losing its sweet edge. "Mom's getting worried. Worried that I knew. Worried that their plan was falling apart." My breath hitched. I looked at myself in the mirror again. The pale, terrified woman staring back at me had to disappear. I couldn't let them see my fear. If they knew I was onto them, what would they do? The question sent a fresh wave of terror through me. I was in their house. I was trapped. I had to be smart. I had to play their game, just for a little while longer. I needed to get back to that table, get my keys in my purse, and walk out the front door. I splashed cold water on my face, the shock of it helping to clear my head. I took one more deep breath, picturing myself as an actress on a stage. I was playing a role, the dutiful, slightly unwell daughter. I could do this. I had been playing a role my whole life. This was just one more performance. I smoothed my hair, straightened my sweater, and practiced a weak smile in the mirror. It looked more like a grimace. I tried again. Better. I unlocked the door. Sarah was standing right there, her arms crossed over her chest, a petulant look on her face. "Finally!" she snapped. "What were you doing in there for so long?" "I told you I have a headache," I said, letting my voice sound tired and frail. I brushed past her, careful not to make eye contact. I think I might be coming down with something. As I walked back towards the stairs, I saw my parents standing at the bottom, looking up. My dad had a frown on his face. My mom had her hands clasped together, a picture of maternal concern. But I saw it now. I saw the calculation in their eyes, the impatience. They were predators, and their prey was taking too long to wander into the snare. The silence that had felt awkward and tense before now felt suffocating. It wasn't just silence. It was the quiet of a hunter waiting in a blind. They were waiting for me to drink the juice. They were waiting for the drug to take hold. They were waiting to pick the bones of my life clean. The trap was real. The only question was whether I was smart enough to escape it. I walked down the stairs, each step feeling like a descent into hell. I forced another weak smile. "Sorry about that," I said to my waiting family. "I'm feeling a little off." "Oh, you poor thing," my mom cooed, rushing forward to put a hand on my forehead. Her hand was cold. "You don't feel like you have a fever. Maybe your blood sugar is low. You should drink your juice." She gestured toward the table, toward the ruby-red glass. And in that moment, I knew with absolute chilling certainty that every word Mark had said was true. Walking back to the dining room table felt like walking the plank. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, to bolt for the front door and never look back. But Mark's warning echoed in my ears. "Don't let them know you're suspicious." I had to act my part. My life, my future, everything I had worked for depended on this performance. I sat back down in my chair, my movements slow and deliberate, as if my head was truly pounding. "Maybe you're right, Mom," I said, my voice just a little shaky. "Maybe I just need some sugar." I watched as 3 pairs of eyes locked onto the glass of cranberry juice. The collective focus was so intense it was almost a physical force. My father cleared his throat. My sister stopped scrolling on her phone. My mother smiled, a genuine, triumphant smile this time. They thought they had won. My hand trembled as I reached for the glass. The condensation felt slick and cold against my fingers. I lifted it, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure they could hear it. I brought the rim of the glass close to my lips, the sweet artificial smell of the juice filling my nostrils. It smelled like poison. I tilted the glass, pretending to take a small sip, letting the liquid touch my lips, but not enter my mouth. I held it there for a second, then lowered the glass, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. "That's better," I murmured, placing the glass back on the table. The tension in the room eased, but only slightly. They were waiting for the main event. They expected me to finish the whole glass. I needed a distraction. I needed a way to get rid of the evidence without them seeing me. I glanced around the table. My dad had started talking again, something about the rising cost of gasoline. Sarah had picked up her phone again, but she wasn't scrolling. She was watching me from the corner of her eye. My mom was pretending to be invested in my dad's monologue, but her gaze kept flicking back to me and my half-full glass. My eyes landed on the thick, dark red tablecloth that draped almost to the floor. It was an old, ugly thing, but tonight it was my salvation. I waited. I let a few minutes pass, letting them think I was slowly sipping the juice. I'd lift the glass, bring it to my lips, and set it down again, each time making sure a little less of it was visible to them. My acting skills were improving by the second. I let my eyelids droop a little, as if a wave of drowsiness was washing over me. My mom chose that moment to get up. "I'll just get the dessert," she announced cheerfully. I made apple crumble. "Your favorite." Another assigned favorite. Another lie. As she walked toward the kitchen, my dad turned his head to follow her. It was the moment I had been waiting for. In one swift, silent movement, I picked up my glass, leaned slightly to the side, and tipped the contents onto the thick carpet beneath the table. The dark juice was instantly absorbed by the dark rug. There was no splash, no sound. It was gone. I placed the empty glass back on the table just as my mom came back into the room, carrying a tray with 4 bowls of crumble. Her eyes went immediately to my glass. Seeing it empty, her face broke into a wide, predatory grin. "Oh, good," she said. "You finished it, see? I told you you'd feel better." I had to clench my fists under the table to stop myself from shaking. She had just smiled at the thought of her daughter being drugged. The monster was real, and it was wearing my mother's face. Now came the second part of my performance. I took a few bites of the apple crumble, which tasted like cardboard in my mouth. Then I let my spoon clatter into the bowl. I put my hand to my head and let out a long, slow sigh. "I'm sorry," I said softly, letting my words slur just a little. "I feel really dizzy all of a sudden." The effect was instantaneous. My sister put her phone down, her eyes wide with anticipation. My dad stopped eating, a look of grim purpose on his face. My mom rushed to my side, her voice a symphony of fake concern. "Oh, my poor girl," she said, placing a hand on my shoulder. Her touch felt like a spider crawling on my skin. "You really must be sick. You should lie down." "No, I should probably just go home," I said, making a weak attempt to stand up. "Nonsense," my dad said, his voice firm. He stood up and came around the table. "You're in no condition to drive. You'll just rest on the couch for a little while. We'll take care of you." He put his arm around me, and I had no choice but to let him guide me from the dining room into the living room. His grip was surprisingly strong, like a jailer leading a prisoner to a cell. The living room was dark, with only a small lamp on in the corner. He led me to the long floral print sofa. "Here you go," my mom said, bustling around, plumping up a cushion and placing it under my head. "Just close your eyes and rest. We're right here if you need anything." I lay down on the couch, my back to the room. I closed my eyes, forcing my body to go limp, my breathing to become slow and even. I was a lamb in a den of wolves pretending to be asleep. The minutes stretched into an eternity. I could hear them moving around, their footsteps soft on the carpet. I could hear them whispering, their voices low and urgent. My entire future, my very life, depended on what they did next. I lay there in the dark, my heart pounding a silent, terrified rhythm, and waited for the betrayal to begin. Lay on the couch, every muscle in my body screaming for me to get up and run, but I forced myself to stay still. My eyes were closed tight, my breathing shallow and even, a perfect imitation of sleep. The floral pattern of the sofa scratched at my cheek, and the scent of potpourri filled my nostrils. I focused on those sensations, on anything that would keep me grounded, keep me from giving in to the rising panic. The whispers started almost immediately. "They thought I was out. Is she out?" Sarah's voice, sharp and eager, cut through the quiet. She sounded like a kid at Christmas, impatient for her presence. The sound of it, the sheer giddiness in her tone, was a fresh stab to my heart. My own sister. "Shh, Sarah," my mom hissed, her voice low. "Don't be so loud. Yes, she's out. I gave her a double dose. That girl can be stubborn. A double dose." The words landed like a blow. My mom, my own mother, had deliberately tried to poison me. The thought was so grotesque, so completely alien to everything I had ever believed about family, that for a moment, I actually felt lightheaded. It wasn't the drug. It was the sheer suffocating weight of their cruelty. Then came my dad's voice, a low rumble, barely audible. "All right, let's get this done. Where's her phone?" I felt a slight jostle as someone reached into my purse, which I had deliberately left on the floor beside the couch. I had made sure the fingerprint reader on my phone was still active, a calculated risk. I knew they wouldn't try passwords. They'd go straight for the easiest method. But what they didn't know was that while I had left the fingerprint option active, I had also quietly enabled a second layer of security, a two-factor authentication, on all my banking apps. It was a fail-safe, a last-ditch effort that I hoped would buy me time. "Got it," Sarah whispered, her voice closer now. I could almost feel her breath on my face. A cold shiver ran down my spine. "Okay, now for the fun part." I felt my right hand being gently lifted. It was Sarah's hand. I recognized the slight tremor. She was excited. Nervous but excited. My thumb was carefully positioned over the fingerprint sensor on my phone. I felt the faint vibration as the phone unlocked. My heart jumped. It was done. They were in. "Bingo," Sarah hissed triumphantly. "Told you it would work." "All right, now be quick," my mom urged. "Just transfer enough, Sarah. Don't be greedy. We don't want her to notice right away." My chest burned with a rage so intense it threatened to consume me. Greed? Not greedy? They were talking about stealing from me as if they were discussing shopping for groceries. As if my hard-earned money I had saved for my future, for a home, for a life free from their parasitic demands, was just loose change to be scooped up. I heard the frantic tapping of fingers on my phone screen. Sarah was clearly moving fast, probably going for my main checking account, the one they knew I used regularly. I could almost picture her face, a gleeful, avaricious expression as she saw the numbers on the screen. My parents were silent, waiting, listening. The air was thick with their anticipation, their quiet desperation. This wasn't just about the money they had failed to get from me before. This was about control. This was about punishing me for daring to say no. This was about reminding me of my place in their twisted family hierarchy. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat almost choking me. Tears pricked at the corners of my closed eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not now, not when I was so close to understanding the true depths of their depravity. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I would not let them win. I lay there, helpless and exposed, listening to the soft sounds of my family dismantling my life. The tapping on my phone continued, frantic and urgent. I could imagine Sarah's focused expression, her tongue perhaps sticking out of the corner of her mouth, completely absorbed in the task of plundering my financial security. My parents were completely silent, their breathing shallow, waiting. The air felt heavy, charged with their expectation. Then, Sarah let out a frustrated gasp. "No, what the hell?" My ears perked up, my body tensing. My heart, which had been racing a moment before, seemed to skip a beat. "What is it?" My mom whispered, her voice sharp with sudden alarm. "It's asking for two-step verification," Sarah whined, her voice filled with disbelief and irritation. "It's sending a code to her other phone or email or something. She changed it." She must have. A wave of relief so profound it almost made me cry washed over me. My failsafe. It had worked. I had quietly updated my banking apps a few weeks ago, adding an extra layer of security precisely because I had a gut feeling that something like this might happen. It was a small act of defiance, a quiet boundary I had set, and now it was paying off. "What?" My dad's voice was a harsh whisper, filled with barely suppressed rage. "She changed it? That little? She knew?" "No, she couldn't have," my mom argued. Though her voice lacked conviction, "She wouldn't suspect us. She's too loyal. It must be some new bank policy. Try another app, Sarah, quick!" More frantic tapping, then another groan of frustration from Sarah. "They all have it. All the main ones. Everything is asking for a code. Or a password after the fingerprint. It's impossible." My dad let out a low, guttural curse. "Damn it, after all this preparation." That's just like her. Always with her rules. Always making things difficult. His words, meant to be an insult, filled me with a quiet, fierce pride. Yes, I had rules. Yes, I made things difficult when it came to protecting myself from their endless demands. And in this moment, those rules had saved me. I heard the frustrated rustling of clothes as Sarah likely slumped back in her chair. The energy in the room, which had been so expectant, so charged with avarice, now sagged into a thick, resentful silence. Their grand plan had unraveled, not because of a moral awakening on their part, but because of a technicality. Because I had finally learned to protect myself. Just put it back. My mom finally sighed, her voice heavy with disappointment. "She'll never know. We'll figure something else out. She'll never know." The words were chilling. They truly believed I was oblivious. They believed they could have drugged me, robbed me, and I would have simply woken up a few hours later, none the wiser, ready to continue being their compliant, responsible daughter. The casual cruelty of it, the absolute lack of remorse, solidified everything. They weren't just flawed people. They were fundamentally broken. They were dangerous. I felt my phone being gently removed from my hand. A moment later, I heard the faint thud as it was placed back on the floor beside my purse. The betrayal had played out, and their heist had failed. They settled back down, the silence now filled not with anticipation, but with the bitter taste of defeat. I lay there, still feigning sleep, my chest burning, my eyes still closed, but seeing everything with a horrifying crystal clarity. This was not a family. This was a syndicate, and I was their mark. And I was done playing the victim. The silence after their failed attempt felt different. It was no longer expectant but resentful, heavy with their frustrated greed. I continued to lie there, feigning a drug-induced slumber, giving them a few more minutes to stew in their disappointment. I needed to let the anger in the room settle, to let them believe they had successfully pulled off their deception, even if the actual theft had failed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I stirred. I let out a soft groan, shifting slightly on the couch. I rubbed my eyes, feigning disorientation, then slowly opened them. I blinked a few times, letting my gaze drift around the dimly lit living room, as if trying to piece together where I was. "Oh," I mumbled, my voice still a little slurred. "What happened? Did I fall asleep?" My mom was instantly by my side, her face once again a mask of sweet concern. "Oh, sweetie, you must have been so tired," she cooed, smoothing my hair back from my forehead. Her touch, which once would have offered comfort, now felt like a violation. "You just dozed right off. You had us worried for a moment there." "I think I must have," I said, managing a weak, bewildered smile. I sat up slowly, wincing slightly as if my head still hurt. Wow, I feel really out of it. Like I just ran a marathon. My dad, who had been sitting back down, now stood up, joining my mom. He looked at me with an odd expression, a mixture of thwarted anger and forced empathy. You definitely looked like you needed the rest, Amanda. You've been working too hard. Sarah, still slumped in her chair, offered a quiet, "Yeah, you were snoring pretty loud." A lie, but I ignored it. She was trying to play her part too, pretending everything was normal. I rubbed my temples. I really think I should head home. I just need to get into my own bed. I started to push myself up, making sure my movements were a little wobbly. "Oh, are you sure, honey?" my mom asked, her voice just a little too insistent. "You really don't look well enough to drive. Maybe you should just stay the night. We have the guest room all ready for you." The guest room? The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through me. Stay the night? In this house with these people after what I had just overheard? Never. I couldn't risk it. I needed to get out. "No, I really can't," I said, forcing a stronger tone into my voice. "I have an early meeting tomorrow. I just need to get back to my place." I was almost fully upright now, swaying just a little for effect. "I'll just take it slow. I'll be fine." My dad stepped forward, a flicker of something dark in his eyes. For a second, I thought he might try to stop me, to physically prevent me from leaving. My heart hammered, but then he seemed to catch himself. He forced a smile. "Of course, honey," he said, his voice softer now. "You know best. Just drive safe and call us when you get home, okay?" "I will," I lied, already knowing I would never call them again. I walked over to the entryway, picked up my purse and my car keys. As I reached for the doorknob, my mom came up behind me. "Here, honey," she said, and I felt her arms wrap around me in a tight hug. It was a practiced embrace, the kind of hug she always gave in public, full of performative warmth. It was meant to feel reassuring, loving, but now it felt like I was being embraced by a viper. Her cheek pressed against mine, and I could smell her familiar perfume. It was a smell I would forever associate with betrayal. "We love you so much, Amanda," she whispered into my ear, her voice thick with emotion. Fake emotion. "Don't you ever forget that." I didn't return the hug. I simply stood there, stiff and unyielding in her arms. "I know, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "I know." Then my dad stepped in, giving me a quick, firm pat on the back. "Take care, kiddo." And then Sarah, with a half-hearted wave from the living room. I pulled away from my mom, forcing myself to make eye contact with each of them one last time. My mom still smiling her plastic smile, my dad trying to look concerned. Sarah, avoiding my gaze, picking at her nails. Three people who had just tried to drug and rob me, now playing the role of the loving family. It was the final hug I would ever give them, the final lie I would ever accept. I opened the front door, stepping out into the cool night air. The streetlights cast long, eerie shadows. I didn't look back. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away. The feeling of freedom, of escape, was intoxicating, but it was mixed with a profound, aching grief for the family I had lost, the family I had never truly had. They had tried to steal my money, but what they had actually stolen was my innocence, my belief in their love. And as I drove away, I knew one thing for certain. I would never let them get away with it. Not this time. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. My mind raced, replaying every whispered word, every fake smile, every calculated movement. The images were seared into my brain. My mother's triumphant grin as she saw the empty juice glass, Sarah's greedy tapping on my phone, my father's quiet rage when their plan failed. But beneath the shock and the pain, a cold, hard resolve was forming. They thought I was oblivious. They thought I was still their easy mark. They were wrong. They had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated me. As soon as I walked through the door of my own apartment, the calm, safe haven I had worked so hard to create for myself, I went straight to my laptop. The audio recording. That was the key. Before I had left for dinner, a tiny, almost subconscious flicker of doubt had prompted me to take a precaution. I had downloaded a discreet audio recording app onto my old, unused flip phone, the one I kept in a drawer for emergencies. I'd placed it deep inside my purse under a pile of tissues and set it to record. Part of me had thought it was overkill, paranoid even. The other part, the part that had been slowly waking up to their true nature, knew better. I pulled the flip phone out of my purse, my fingers fumbling with the tiny buttons. The recording was there. I connected it to my laptop and started to transfer the file. As the little bar crawled across the screen, I felt a deep, chilling satisfaction. They had walked right into their own trap. They had confessed their crimes, not to me, but to a silent, unblinking witness. The recording was clear. I listened to it twice, my heart growing colder with each play. My mom's voice, explaining the double dose, Sarah's eagerness to unlock my phone, my dad's fury when the two-step verification stopped them, their casual discussion about how much to steal, about how I would never know. It was all there, undeniable and damning. The next morning, I went to the police. I had printed out the text messages from Mark, the ones warning me. I had the audio recording. I had my banking records, showing the attempted login attempts and the failed transfers. I laid it all out for the detective, a quiet, serious woman named Detective Miller. She listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she played the audio recording herself. Her face, which had been impassive, hardened as my mother's voice described the double dose, and my father's curses filled the small office. "This is serious, Ms. Lewis," she said, her voice grave. "Attempted fraud, unlawful use of biometrics, possibly even assault depending on the substance they intended to use." "This is your family?" I met her gaze, my eyes dry, my voice steady. They were. They are not anymore. The police moved quickly. With the audio recording as primary evidence, along with the text messages and the forensic data from my phone, they had a strong case. My parents and Sarah were brought in for questioning. I didn't see them. I didn't want to. I let the law handle them. Within a week, the charges were filed: attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and unlawful use of biometrics. The specific drug they intended to use couldn't be definitively identified from the recording, but the intent was clear, and the audio recording sealed their fate. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel a surge of vindictive joy. What I felt was a profound emptiness, a chilling finality. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had tried to destroy me, and I had stopped them. The final act of severing ties was swift and brutal. I blocked their numbers, changed my own number, and deleted them from every social media platform. I sent a single, simple text to Mark. "Thank you. You saved my life." He replied with, "Just glad I could help." "Sarah needs help, Amanda. Real help." I didn't reply. My concern for Sarah was gone, buried under the rubble of their betrayal. I also sent a letter to my extended family, explaining in stark, simple terms what had happened, attaching copies of the police report. Some were horrified, some were skeptical, but the message was sent. The truth was out. I had pulled back the curtain on the perfect Lewis family. I had exposed them for who they truly were. The silence that followed was different from the one I had experienced before. It wasn't the tense, suffocating silence of their disapproval. It was the vast, echoing silence of absence, the silence of a clean break. It was terrifying, and it was liberating. I had cut them out permanently. My family was gone, and in their place, there was just me, free. That night, lying on their couch, pretending to be incapacitated, I finally understood. Blood isn't family. Love is. And if you have to drug your own daughter, if you have to conspire to steal from her, if you have to treat her as nothing more than a resource to exploit, then you have already lost her. You've lost more than just her money. You've lost her trust, her respect, her heart. You've lost everything that truly matters. It was a painful truth, a truth that ripped away the last vestiges of my childhood illusions. But it was also a powerful truth, because once I understood it, I was free. Free from the guilt, free from the obligation, free from the crushing weight of their expectations. I was no longer the responsible one, the savior, the family ATM. I was just Amanda, and for the first time in my life that felt like enough. The journey since that night hasn't been easy. There are days when the grief still hits me, a sudden sharp ache for the family I thought I had, for the love I always craved. But then I remember the whispers, the greedy tapping, the cold smile, and the ache recedes, replaced by a quiet strength. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who continuously hurt you, even if those people share your blood. I built a new life, a life on my own terms. I bought that condo I had been saving for. I invested in myself, in my own happiness, in genuine connections with people who truly cared about me. The relationships I have now are built on honesty, respect, and unconditional support. They are my chosen family, and they are worth more than any amount of money. My story isn't unique. I know there are so many others out there who have experienced similar betrayals, who are trapped in toxic family dynamics, feeling invisible, unheard, and exploited. My hope in sharing this is that it might help someone else find their voice, find their courage, and find their way out. If you've been through something similar, or if you're currently struggling with a family that takes more than it gives, remember this: you are not alone. Your worth is not defined by what you can do for others. Your boundaries are valid, And you deserve a life free from manipulation and emotional abuse. What would you have done in my place? Would you have confronted them? Would you have stayed silent? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of resilience, strength, and finding your own path, even when the path ahead seems dark.